Good afternoon, folks. My name is Lynn Johnson. I apologize for my voice. I forgot to have a sip of water, but I'm in a small town in southeast Saskatchewan called Oxbow, Saskatchewan. And as you can see, I'm in a very professional photography studio, so I spare no expense. But actually, I'm in the back end of a friend of mine's store that is a combination congregation, gathering hall, entertainment, and a church thing. So, in keeping with the theme, if you've been praying for a possible insight on how to putt online and do some putting things, I'm hoping that I might be able to, I might go beyond the expectations to answer your prayers, but I'm going to say back in about I'd say year 2007, 2011, I spent a few weeks at my brother's house in the city, and in the evenings he had a tight 12 carpet, and I decided I'd work on a putting technique. Now, I would like to give credit where credit is due as far as the contributing elements of all the things that I involved inclusively to establish this, so everybody gets the credit, because it really does work. And if you find it by doing this, it really does get work for you. Credit given, I would like to see credit acknowledged and given where credit is due. So, starting with that, the evolution of this putt is in about 1993 or so. I picked up a Golf Tips magazine and in an obscure classified section ad, there was a small classified ad by a gentleman named Dr. Jack Kirkendall, and he was a medical physicist and anatomical analyst, engineer type configuration, and he was also a golfer, but he had his premise was it was called natural golf, his approach, because what he had analyzed was a way to basically scientifically figure out the optimum mechanical delivery and lever systems with reference to the body, the chiropractic, the minimum of variables, the subconscious. And what he did was he ended up with what is considered the perfect mechanics for a golf swing to deliver a reliably straight ball. A couple of years before that, when he was talking to a person, he was up in Canada, and he was explaining his discovery, and they said, "Oh, that's Mo Norman." And for people in the golf world, everybody's heard of Mo Norman. He, referentially, as far as things, there have been references on his accolades over the years as far as top golfers. Of course, we can't forget Arnold Palmer, the King, Gary Player, the Black Knight, Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, and on it goes. Essentially, Mo Norman's ball striking prowess was, well, of the many years since '93, in which I've studied and worked in this only as a recreational golfer. He is, in fact, in the accolades. The truth of the matter is, he is the shaman. But credit given there to Mo. This is not about Mo or natural golf mechanics. But we're going to go back to Jack Kirkendall, who was into the whole aspect of it. And that's, that gave me a background as far as the metaphysicals, the mechanics, and the common sense, and the science of how to tie in the mechanics of a human body and the natural sequential shifts for minimizing levers and torques and things. And as well as that, it was a good study as far as subconscious training and those elements. So, tip of the hat to Dr. Jack Kirkendall. And I am preparing this video primarily for a gentleman out of Honolulu who I phoned up a few days ago by chance, his first name is Matt. His last name I cannot remember, but he is on the PGA. He is apparently a PGA Teachers Hall of Fame member. But he has also been working with Jack Kirkendall since the early 90s as well. And so I phoned up the other day. I thought I hadn't talked to Jack for years, and got talking to Matt. We started discussing things, and I said, other than that, I mentioned to him that I had figured out a way and devised a putting stroke with some insights from Mo and Jack over the years, how to basically lock the delivery of the stroke into the ball on the putt, into the subconscious, and a lineup method into the subconscious, that essentially the outcome, if you rehearse and become familiar with the technique or the basic method, hitting a line and basically reliably knowing that you're going to hit line in the setup is virtually almost infallible. I worked on this, developing these techniques that came into the final working model of my putting stroke over about 3 weeks, 2-3 hours a night in the basement of my brother's house in Regina one year. And essentially, next year, later on, I golfed a couple of years, but then later, to demonstrate my proficiency in it that I had acquired, another friend of mine who is also an engineer, but an avid golfer, and he always looks at physics, and he incorporated a great deal of natural golf and that into his swing. But I went and demonstrated one night my putting, because he remarked how my putting had improved that spring, and so I explained, for economy of words and time, I explained relatively a bit of a background to Mark, as I've already explained to you. We went up to the upstairs of an old hotel that had a flat foyer with a tight twill carpet, and it was pretty much flush, flat, a true floor. And took a little putting cup, and give or take, I'm going to say the putt was a good honest 15 feet, but I'll stretch the luck and I'm going to say 60. But we set the cup down, and I said, Mark, I'm going to take a couple of putts, get my line, see if there's anything in the carpet. I'm going to get a putt, and once I got my line on it, I said, I'm going to come back and we'll see how many I can do in a row. And so I did just that. And then I started, and I putted 19 putts in a row. And basically my string ended on 20 because I was an inch and a half short. Of course, I was out of shape and didn't take care of myself, so obviously I was winded or tired and just didn't have the energy, or familiarity breeds contempt, and I was just being so careful to get number 20, and it didn't happen. Subconscious does mean things to a person at times. Now, obviously, if I would have been in top physical shape, like, say, somebody like Gary Player, well, Gary, he's committed to the cause of doing his best. I might still be there, and you wouldn't be seeing this, so you thank Gary that he didn't take over for me, because otherwise you'd be missing this. But at any rate, I'm going to go on with this now. All right, the evolution of this putt, as I saw it, there was one day, I bought one of the shoulder length putters at a garage sale just to see if I liked it, and I went and I pulled it out, and I saw some obvious mechanics and advantages to it, but in the overall, I didn't really like it. And as well as that, it was awkward sticking out of my golf bag, and it was always a pain when it went in the trunk of my car. But then when I started working on this putting stroke of my brother's that winter, I thought, well, I'm going to see if I can't reproduce the advantages of a long shoulder length fixed anchored putter out of my body, okay? And so I monkeyed around, and I adjusted my stroke. And what I did was I rolled out my shoulder like this, and I basically had a fixed, rigid left arm, a firm grip on my putter. I have a square putter, so the back of my hand is square, so it's a easy alignment. But then at that point, I was experimenting with just pulling my left arm back on a fulcrum like this with my right arm. Now, as you can see, you don't have to worry about keeping your lower body still, or like imagining you're standing in a barrel or in a bucket of sand, because you're not creating torque and you don't have that preoccupation in your conscious mind that you got to hold on to get a stable stance with some of the conventional putting strokes. I will demonstrate this. Pay attention to my lower body and this. Relatively, I could clean eavesdrops with this stroke. And here we go. See, it's relatively straight back and forth. There's no, and it wasn't, if you notice, there was nothing going on my, here, I'll move. I'll remind you that. Seeing my hips here. Watch, I'm going, but for a regular putt, you might go back this far, but you're seeing my stable. So that's one thing. So your body's squared, your alignment is square, parallel lines, physics makes sense so far. So at that point, I was working on it, and basically my technique at that point was, as far as that, well, Harvey Penick gets credit in the simple fact of always taking dead aim. Now, there was an article in an old Reader's Digest that was from about 1974, 75. Or no, 87, 88, because I started golfing at the age of 31. And it was about 3 years into my golfing as far as my putting. And there was an old Reader's Digest as far as about a reliable, refined putting stroke that would, well, if it had to do with improving golf, of course, you read it. So, but it basically gave the elements, of when you're setting up in that, you should set up on your line, and you basically, you're using three practice strokes, okay? And you can do that lined up so you don't have to reestablish your stance, or you can do it so that you're looking down the line, or down the line at the ball there, and what you're doing is you're looking strictly at the ball. You're feeling for weight. You're feeling for weight in your subconscious until it feels right. And then at that point, as far as line, you go into the ball. And then what you're doing is you're looking, and the other important thing is, anytime you're putting, regardless of what type of putting stroke, always make sure that the alignment of your eyes when they run down, it's running as a straight line to the ball. Because if your head is up, as you turn, it's creating an arc, and it's creating a distortion in your alignment. Because here and there, different angles. So, as I say, you go down, you drop your head down, and then you kind of got that weight in the back of your mind. So you take your line. You know, we're just going to assume that I'm going to hit at an imaginary cup there. So then at that point, all things as far as line, you are basically taking back, and you're imagining that when you're doing this, you're looking at the cup, and you're imagining that your right hand, as far as the subconscious imprint, is you're making a gentle toss of the ball towards your target line. And you're imprinting that into your subconscious. With the left arm, likewise the same thing. When you come back, you're pretending that you're just basically backhanding and swinging the back of your hand towards the target line. Same thing. Of course, this all happens when you're doing it both together and they're both being programmed at the same time. So that's how you program your subconscious as far as the putting stroke. You will notice afterwards, I'm not doing this in order. I'm just letting the explanation evolve. Like writing a song, I'm making it up as I'm going along, but not the elements of the putting technique. But so there's that. Now, as far as other physics and that, I started monkeying around, and I realized with this long putter, there were some physical problems, like some dynamics, because, well, here's what I did. Ridge is here. But again, I thought, how do you get it into the subconscious? Well, you know when you're pulling a a string on a bow and arrow, you line up the bow, you pull back the string, and basically the line you pull back on, once you have the arrow aimed, you let go of the string. The string. And basically the torque of the bow is pulling it back that way. So basically the bow is extending up, so the pull force is actually to the front. You know, it's not the string pushing itself back, it's being pulled from the front. This is the comprehension of the physics. So you see that it's on the merit of the actual physics as it is, not as it might appear to be. But so at that point, I figured, well, if I take a rigid left arm and I put resistance in this, a fixed amount of fixed resistance period all the time, and at that point, what you elementally have is when you pull it back and you let go, it returns automatically. So with a fixed tension, if you want to hit the ball further, you pull it back further, which builds up more tension with no subconscious or conscious weight adjustment for control mechanics. Okay? Another thing for calibrating on greens, end of the day, you go, you check the stimp, you putt a few, and you see that the greens, the stimps vary from one green to the next. Simple way to calibrate. When you're doing it that way, and you put up some test balls, you put a ball down, and essentially, when you have a feel for it, when you pull it back 8 inches or 10 inches and you release, it kind of goes that far. Fair enough. Okay, other days you might pull back 8 or 10 inches and you release, and they didn't mold the greens, so it doesn't go quite as far. You can get a feel for the calibration. Then you basically pull back and you regiment your intervals, however you work it into your putting drills when you're feeling and getting a feel for calibration. So it's visual, it's conscious, but it's still imprinted in the subconscious by training, not by guesswork and feel, as it is with other strokes. With this resistance factor, you can calibrate and you can rely on the physics, the tangible physics, not the feel for it, but the actual definite, realistic, tangible feel that you're actually feeling as far as what's not a guesswork. So we've got that out of the way. Now the other thing I also do in this technique, as I say, the demonstration is it is the equivalent of pulling back, letting the tension and basically letting go, and it goes towards your target line. The other thing that is essentially important is when you do it, you basically put reverse pressure or reverse energy in your grip. As opposed to pressing together, your hands together and pressing like that, you're pulling this way with that one, you're pulling that way with that one. That keeps your arms and your hands locked, more unitized as working together. The other trick of that is, when you're pulling back, if you don't do that unitized thing, when you pull back and you've got this pull here, what happens is there's a tendency of a bit of a pileup when you basically let it go, but your right hand comes along. And it can cause a little bit of an anomaly. So this basically bulletproofs it by reverse pressure. So when you pull back, you don't have to consciously go and deliver the putt. You know that what you're doing is you're pulling back and you're feeling the muscle tension, and all you're doing is letting the muscle tension programmed in the subconscious return to its original position, guaranteed online. So that isn't distorted when it goes back. With this reverse tension on this, when you're pulling back like this, instead of pushing forward to release, you just stop and pulling back, at which point there's no pileup, and your left hand automatically just pulls through towards the ball, like a free string on a bow. You're not following and hanging on. That's what you achieve there. So those are the basic elements. So now, what else have I forgot? I think that's about got it. So all I'm going to do now, that I have basically given you the elements here, I'm going to show you my putting stroke. And as I say, I will basically reveal those sequential putting strokes that went from the Golf Digest as far as the process and the routine, the kinesiology, the subconscious dynamic programming tip that I had to Mo Norman, whose books, and Jack Kirkendall, as far as his videos on natural golf, and Harvey Penick, of course, and whoever else. All those great golfers that are on the PGA, and a tip of the hat to Arnold Palmer, who is one of the initiating attitudes as far as pulling out the bank account and giving the reputability and the opinion that the Golf Channel originated, because many hours of very constructive and thoughtful entertainment and an exceptional crowd to hang around with in the evening when you're watching it, or anytime you've got the excuse, of course. But we'll just say in the evening, because in the daytime, of course, I'm not laying around on the couch watching golf. And given the opportunity, I'm actually out golfing. But at any rate, here we go. Essentially, arbitrarily, the reads and all that stuff. Oh, somebody, well, I'll give it out to you afterwards. But here, there's my ball. I'm sizing up. I'm looking for my references. But for people that have never golfed much and aren't, I will background. But essentially, what you're doing is you're always putting to your line, your target line, which is not always the cup, of course. You got to account for green. You've got to hang into the green, the roll of the green, the grain of the grass, all those things. All those things. So, at any rate, I see my line there, and what I do at that point is I come around behind, and you notice I minimize, and I don't stand behind and then go ahead, but basically what I do is I take my stance and I basically go down and I drop down right here. That's the finish of my stroke, because you notice when I'm locked up, it comes to a definite stop. It's limited by the right arm. There's no follow through. Basically, it comes to a dead stop. Okay, the reason I finish in front is because basically if I practiced my dead stop right at the ball, if there's a slightest little anomaly, or I forget to roll up my shoulder or whatever, or I get a little antsy and I look up, there is the slight chance, if you don't get it totally right, a bit of a tug left. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go down here. I'm going to set up. As I say, sit down, and then I come up. I just basically come up like this. And what I do at that point is I look at the cup, and I'm taking it back, and I'm feeling for weight. I'm imagining I'm feeling for the weight of my hand and the pull. And the other thing is that I am meticulous about is before I do the 3-stroke setup, is basically I do this and then go up, and then I do a practice one. Your subconscious knows, but basically if you're lined up and everything's working and you do a tug at it and you follow through and you go, that doesn't feel right. I kind of tugged a little left. Your subconscious said you weren't lined and it was trying to pull you over. So you just do a shuffle. You'll naturally get it in your stance. You readjust, and maybe 2 or 3 times, and you wait it until when you pull it back and it goes through, bang, bang, yeah, that's nothing but net, you know? So at that point, once you've got that feel and you've got that line up above, of course, then you drop down, you put your stance, you come up, and at that point, all things are firing. You basically do 3 times like that, feeling for weight, and basically at that point, then you put it down like this. You shift back like that. So like I say, a little bit of a shift for follow through. And that way it's not going to tug left. You shift, you come back, you follow through. And whatever you've calibrated for your feel, but you want it to go, well, we're going to go back 12 inches because it goes that far. at 12. You basically go like that. And, well, I missed that by 1.5 feet. I'm basically going to have to get some carpenters in and jack the building and straighten the floor. We can't have that. At any rate, so, no, I didn't run away. I was just embarrassed by that horrible putt. But, so again, now that I've kind of walked through it there once, we're going to put it back down, and I'm going to go through it one more time, and I'll explain it a little less this time. But again, remembering all those elements of the setup, you basically sit there, stand there, basically do a tug. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, that's the one. Down behind, establish your stance, your finished follow-through stance. You do the shift, and basically up, programming, basically pulling back with the right hand, reverse pressure. When you're done, just stop pulling with the right hand. It automatically releases and pulls through in your subconscious infallibly. And that demonstrates the point. And the delivery is like as reliable as a string on the boat. So at that point, hopefully you might see that it's conceivable. But Gary Player, if he would have been there that night with his putting stroke, well, as I say, we may not be here yet. And I might have to go back to, give Gary another meal and trim his beard. That'll probably be extremely long, but he's no quitter. But at any rate, however, at that point, speaking of not no quitters, at this point, I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to acknowledge somebody else. At any rate, back like this. Again, there it is. Okay, another acknowledgement, and where this goes as far as perhaps credence and some credibility that my putting stroke and my insights might help another putter. A putting stroke, whether you use a bit or all of it. And I can't remember the year, but one of the younger gentlemen golfer on the PGA that I probably have, that I identify as in that particular category and age group. My favorite golfer is Adam Scott. Pretty darn nice guy. And basically, when he gets focused in that, at his particular time of it, if the mood struck him and somebody was coming and standing alongside him saying, "You think you can?" Well, Adam Scott could basically bear down, and yes, he could, regardless who it was in the world. But actually, the reason I like Adam Scott is the guy is a babe magnet, and I figured, well, if I became acquainted with him, if I went over and introduced myself, well, it might be inevitable, if nothing else. He would have some extremely acceptable scenery about him. He basically sets a good scene. So a little bit of speculative thinking that he's probably consistent in that regard. At any rate, talking to Golf Channel he was really not doing some things. He was exciting the crowd, but as far as short putts, he was kind of having a bit of a confounded time whenever he was wondering what's going on. Well, that fall, I think it was after the season was over. No, when was it? Yeah, no, it was in the fall before this. The grass was still on the greens and stuff up at the lake. One fall, or late last fall, or a few falls ago, whenever. But I basically contacted and found a place, because I was going to share the insight about my putting stroke with Adam Scott. Contact was his father's golf design and architectural design company. He builds golf courses, and he's also a very respected and notable senior member of the Australian PGA. Sent an inquiring email, and I can't remember the nature of the full extent of the thing, but yes, he said, well, I'd be interested in seeing this. So essentially, I discussed the appraisal. So I went out to the golf course that day, and a friend of mine held the camera. And in a far less lengthy display, because it was more visual, and I figured he's a professional, I'd explain the basic elements to his father, so they'll fill in the blanks. And as well as that, my friend was holding it hands-free. So, his arms would probably get tired, but I stood there and I did a demonstration and the basic elements of my putt. And at the end, I was just standing there and talking, and I pulled the putt, and, of course I missed it by a couple of inches, which, I covered for it, in truth, based on obvious fact. But I says, well, there you go, and I missed it because I was busy talking and not thinking about the putt. Grabbed the ball back, and I don't know, 7 or 8 feet just lined up, and boing, underneath, and I said, that's about it. So I sent it off to Mr. Scott, and as they say, I left it alone at that. And I don't know, 2.5, 3 weeks later, I got a package, an unexpected package in the mail. And I opened it up, and there was a black Titleist hat with a personalized Adam Scott hat. And I think it was a golf shoe bag, or maybe a golf ball bag. Again, Adam Scott personalized. And a very nice, cordial, appreciative note from his father, explaining that he, in fact, was associated and was very much a student of the putting game. Thanked me in a thoughtful regard. And at that time, and as always, but I was kind of in the struggling dire straits, and oh boy, if there's some merit to this. So I sent back a remark to him that, with regard to coaching or whatever, he really wanted to fine tune or needed or wanted some insights. That, essentially my state of affairs was as far as personal economy. Unfortunately, as far as golf and sharing things and knowledge, I do it for the love of it, but unfortunately I expressed that basically, if you want, you pay. But at any rate, and that wasn't necessary, but I received a nice reply from him after I sent him, and most appreciative and much delighted and quite overwhelmed thanks for this nice surprise in the mail. And he assured in a note that he says if there was anything he says I would basically have some notable acknowledgement, etc., etc. If as far as time, he said he would assure me in that regard. So I left it at that. And the next spring, Adam Scott came over on the tour. And if you folks have specs or record books, maybe I should check with Golf Digest. You can find, they have everything. But Adam Scott, the first two entries that he made on the PGA that year, whatever it was, he basically went at it, and he won the first 2 tournaments in a row that he was over here. I think I saw portions of one or something, but as far as his putting stroke, as far as his elements, it wasn't an exact copy. In relative terms, it wasn't even kind of a close copy, but I did notice some things as far as alignment or techniques, and I kind of thought, he's picked up on some of this as far as subconscious imprinting. I speculated on it. I mentioned it to his dad and that, but I just sent an email, but I said, well done, a couple of tournaments. And I kind of left it alone, and I think I saw him about 2 or 3 putts on through the season that year. And at the end of the year, after the season was over, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody finds out, but it seems to me that as far as the PGA putting stats that year, and this is where the subconscious and all this stuff might have a real relevance as far as a real advantage, is because on short putts, it's reliable. I mean, back when I was putting and playing on good greens, I was devastated if it didn't go down. If I was at 10 feet and in, if it didn't go down, basically I was grumpy for at least until I had something to make me feel better, like a nice drive on the next hole. But at the end of the year, I can't remember what the exact stat was, but it seems he was first on the tour that year as far as percentage points on putting on putts 20 feet and over. So I draw no conclusions, but essentially, that is my claim to fame, that if nothing else, Adam Scott's dad sent me a hat of his in the mail. So there you go. So that's all I'm going to get from that. But in acknowledgement, basically acknowledgement to Phil Scott in a very cordial and thoughtful regard, that if I might ever get to Australia, I would look forward to going over to his golf course, and no doubt if his son's there, beat my ass off. But at any rate, we'll get him out in the putting green, and maybe I can get, well, I'd never play for money. Poor kid doesn't have that. Who would want to take advantage of some poor struggling young kid? I don't want to take his money. But at any rate, that's about it, folks. And with that, is there anybody else to acknowledge? No, that's it. That's it. Oh, other than my friend that allowed me to come into here. So, like I say, this old store recreation hall and church thing. If I'm the answer to your prayers, well, thank you very much. But my contact information will be at the bottom of the video on this YouTube release that I'm making. But if you do wish to give me a call and you want to have some further insights and stuff, sure, happy to share. And even though we're in the church and stuff like that, no, I'm not going to pass the plate for just a simple call on the phone. Always happy to help. At any rate, best regards.